Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us today. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by Police Chief David Nisleit, San Diego Police Department, Charmaine Mosley, who's the Executive Director of the Community Review Board on Police Practices, Doug Case, a member also of the Review Board, Gerald Brown, who's the Executive Director of the Citizens Advisory Board on Police and Community Relations, Samantha Jenkins joins us, a member of the Advisory Board and Executive Committee member of the NAACP San Diego branch. Stephen Gross also joins us. He is Chair of the Human Relations Commission. And Bishop Dr. William Benson joins us with Total Deliverance Worship and also President of the San Diego chapter of Pastors on Point. I also want to acknowledge, as I begin, Francine Maxwell, who's President of the NAACP of San Diego. She was not able to join us this afternoon, but she has been a very integral part of the conversation that has led to today. Today, we are here to announce two new standalone policies that will help San Diego police officers, help reduce the use of force, further embrace the highest standards of accountability, increase public trust, and protect against the unnecessary loss of life. 3 weeks ago, I called for a series of community meetings to gather public feedback on community and police relations. A couple of questions that we all asked and put around the table. How can we increase trust? How can we enhance transparency and accountability? How can we move forward as a community? Those meetings culminated with really one unified message. The way in which police officers use force is a top issue. And that wasn't new information. In fact, since last year, 3 of the city's boards and commissions had been in consultation with community groups on this very issue. Some of these groups, which are represented here this afternoon. And earlier this month, each board voted and approved recommendations that would require officers to use de-escalation techniques to calm situations and intervene if they see an officer using excessive force. The San Diego Human Relations Commission has approved it. The Community Review Board on Police Practices has approved it. And the Citizens Advisory Board on Police and Community Relations has approved it. Today, we are pleased to announce that the San Diego Police Department has approved it and is putting it into action. Let me be clear. It's not as though the SDPD was operating without de-escalation tactics before. But now the department has separate, expanded, and standalone policies that don't just suggest de-escalation, they require it. And I want to give an overview of these changes and then turn it over to the chief and some of our speakers. As I mentioned, first, SDPD now has a standalone policy to de-escalate the use of force. It requires officers, when safe and reasonable, to use techniques that can resolve situations, either through lower levels of force or no force at all. That is important because de-escalation tactics help officers to diffuse a situation, enhance, obviously, their officers and the public's safety. And it lessens unintended consequences. And as a result, of course, can result in lives saved. De-escalation steps include things like creating a buffer zone between an officer and a subject to help reduce tensions, or calling on specialized resources such as the Psychiatric Emergency Response Team. These policies are meant to protect the officer as much as the subject and prevent escalation whenever possible before force is used. I want to be clear, force should always be the last option. But SDPD can still use reasonable force levels if de-escalation tactics do not work. The second change is officer intervention. This policy complements the first, and I think is just as important. SDPD now has a new standalone policy outlining an officer's duty to intervene. This policy requires officers to step in if another officer is using unreasonable force, and it mandates that they report the incident to a supervisor. This is a policy that will help make sure that what happened in Minneapolis does not happen here in San Diego. SDPD operates under a culture of excellence. I insist upon it. Chief Nisleit insists upon it. And I mean it when I say SDPD has some of the best men and women in the country that are proudly serving our city and our department. And this policy codifies what our department already believes. Protection and preservation of human life is the #1 goal. The actions of one officer can impact all officers. The actions of one officer can impact all communities. So if the actions of one officer go too far, every officer has a vested interest in making sure that it does not. These changes do not represent the crossing of a finish line, but they do represent the bottom line, the foundation of trust that all of us are working to build upon and improve upon. They are part of a lasting, continued conversation between our police department and the community. Just like SDPD did with the banning of the carotid restraint, we are setting a new standard. And just like with the banning of that restraint, these are reforms that California and the nation should follow. These practices join several others recently revised or already on the books at the San Diego Police Department. Policies like exhausting all alternatives before discharging a service weapon, requiring all use of force to be reported, establishment of the use of force continuum, restrictions upon shooting at moving vehicles, and require a warning before discharging a service weapon. They're all things that SDPD has already done. The best practices of today, as I think all of us know, will not be the best practices of tomorrow. We recognize that there will always be more work to do, constant work to do, which is why I'm continuing the conversations with the community and encouraging the public to stay involved through the Community Review Board on Police Practices, through the Citizens Advisory Board on Police and Community Relations, and the Human Relations Commission. It's been a coordinated, consistent effort, and I think that has led us to the results that we have seen not only today, but over the last several months and years. I want to thank Chief Nisleit. He is plugged into the needs of this department and the needs of our community, and he does it 24/7. I don't think he rests at all and probably doesn't sleep very much. But that's the type of dedication that we are fortunate to have in the city from not only this department, but from the person who is leading it at the top. His actions, his commitment to today are helping San Diegans become leaders that we are in accountability and reform. And so with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Chief of Police Dave Nisleit. Chief?
Thank you, sir. I want to start off by first telling the community we hear you, we're listening. I also want to thank Charmaine Mosley from CRB, members of the Citizens Advisory Board, Francine Maxwell, Samantha Jenkins from NAACP, Stephen Groach from the Human Relations Commission. This is something, when I talk about de-escalation policy, this is something that we've been working on for a while. And as I say, we've been listening a lot, and we hear what the community's concerns are. And so really when I look at this new de-escalation policy and when I look at this new the duty to intervene, it's really to give clarity and give clear direction not only to the officers but also to the community of what is the expectations of the officers and what the community can expect from us. With our goal of always being preservation of human life is always our first priority. This new de-escalation policy, I believe, is the most robust or one of the most robust policies in this nation. It really further explains and gives expectations to our officers that you must look at all de-escalation matters. At the end of the day, our goal is to solve all incidents without any use of force. I mean, obviously, that's our first goal, and I really, truly believe that this new de-escalation policy gives the officers the clarity, gives our supervisors the clarity on the expectations of what it is that we're asking them to do. And then when you look at this duty to intervene policy, same thing. You look at this, we really changed the our duty to intervene policy, where it used to say you may or should, to a shall. It's an absolute, it's a mandate. that if an officer sees an officer using force that is unreasonable for the resistance that they're trying to overcome, that the officer must intervene. And that intervene could be in the method of first a verbal to an actual touching to an actual restraining. And it's spelled out in that policy. And again, I believe this policy is one of the most robust in the nation. And so I'm very proud to be pushing this forward. As a police department, I'm very honored to work with chiefs that are in the back of the room that understand that we're always looking to get better, that improvement is just a day-to-day operation. And so when you look at best practices across this nation and look at what our goal is, preservation of human life, doing the very best that we can for our community, these two policies put us in better line to do that. But we're not done. We're not resting on our laurels. As we continue to move this department forward, as we continue to move law enforcement forward, we will continue to look at best practices across the nation, how best we can serve the communities that we are so honored to serve. And so, again, I want to thank all those involved, CRB, CAB, NAACP, Bishop Benson, I'm sorry I forgot you in the first time, and Pastors on Point. I see Dr. Gerald Brown over there, and, of course, Stephen Groats from the Human Relations Commission. We couldn't have done it without your input. I appreciate your input. I appreciate those conversations. And, again, we look forward to continue to serve this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Next, I'd like to introduce Doug Case, who is representing the Community Review Board on police practices and who's been a real strong voice in the community in this area. Doug, thank you for all of your hard work and support.
I would like to thank Mayor Faulconer and Chief Nisleit for moving quickly to respond to the voices of the community by adopting nationally recognized best policies and practices shown to reduce police force. I want to speak specifically to the de-escalation policy. At the emergency meeting of the Community Review Board on Police Practices earlier this month, the board made a strong recommendation that the SDPD de-escalation policy needed to be more robust and clearly state that de-escalation is a requirement when appropriate and safe. Officers who have the opportunity to de-escalate and neglect to do so should be held accountable. The new policy announced today meets those expectations. Over the years, the CRB has reviewed multiple cases where the use of force could have been avoided had the officers slowed things down and attempted to communicate effectively and calmly with the subject. In some cases, the approach of the officers actually escalated the situation. The implementation of the new policy will allow more incidents to be resolved peacefully, which benefits both the officers as well as the public they serve. SDPD is ahead of the curve in terms of de-escalation training mandated by the state. The CRB has appreciated the opportunity to assist as role players in effective communications training for new officers, and we encourage further community collaboration. The new policies announced today reflect a significant step in the right direction, but there's still a long road ahead. The CRB looks forward to working with the community and the police department to make additional recommendations so that the San Diego Police Department can truly be America's finest. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Next, I'd like to invite up Samantha Jenkins, who is representing the Citizens Advisory Board on Police and Community Relations, as well as the NAACP. Samantha, thank you for being here.
Good afternoon. Today, as Mayor said, I'm here representing both the CAB and the NAACP, and I'd like to first speak as a representative of the CAB. Today, the CAB commends Mayor Faulconer and SDPD Chief Nisleit for recognizing the current moment in San Diego as an impetus for addressing long-held community concerns about policing, practices, and policies. The adoption of Campaign Zero's 8 Can't Wait recommendations are recognized by the board as being a substantive first step with San Diego stakeholders. These changes reflect both the proposals and recommendations that have been put forth by the board during their 2 years of focused work in this area. The board looks forward to continued partnership regarding these changes, as well as others that we hope will be embraced soon. Now, speaking on behalf of the NAACP, I thank both Mayor Faulconer and Chief Nisleit for adopting Campaign Zero's 8 Can't Wait recommendations. Additionally, because we recognize that police officers are sworn to protect citizens from harm, we appreciate that the department has added new language regarding an officer's duty to intervene. This new level of built-in accountability will hopefully usher in a new culture of policing in San Diego. We recognize that policies presented today will serve as a valuable starting point for continued conversation and work towards improving both public trust and safety in our communities. We look forward to being an ongoing partner in that work.
Thank you, Samantha. Now I'd like to invite up Stephen Gross, who's chair of the Human Relations Commission. Stephen, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Faulconer, and good afternoon. The Human Relations Commission and commissioners and I would like to thank the mayor and his office for soliciting feedback from the community. In addition to that, we'd like to thank Chief Nisleit and his command staff for listening to the community and adopting what our recommendations actually are. The proposed recommendations from the community will help to increase oversight and to help continue to guide future discussion between the community and the police department. We believe that community engagement is the building block and a path forward between the community and the police department, and will help build a strong relationship between SDPD and the community that it serves. The HRC wants to thank you all.
Thank you. And finally, I'd like to invite up Bishop William Besson. Bishop, thank you for all of your help and support, your active engagement with our city, with the community, and always being there for the city. Bishop?
Good afternoon. It's an honor and a privilege for me to be here on this afternoon to celebrate the beginning of the hard work that was needed and necessary for our community. It is obvious that the San Diego Police Department, under the direction of Chief Nisleit, has heard the petitions of the community. Community, your voices have been heard. We thank our mayor for creating a forum of community involvement people that has the heartbeat of the community to make this one San Diego. Mayor, we thank you. Community, we know you asking for much more, and we know there's a lot of hard work that needs to go into this. But this has to be celebrated as us going forward. Once again, San Diego is now the footprint of what many cities and states will be doing as we begin to add more robust and more constructed comments to our de-escalation training process. We thank God for everyone that has been a part of this, and community, keep speaking. We hear your voice, and I believe that our mayor and our police chief, as well as our police officer, are willing to make this really San Diego's finest. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop. Thank you, Bishop. That concludes our remarks, and we're happy to answer any questions. I don't know if there's any questions online or through the speaker.
One question today from Brandon Lewis with CBS 8. This question is for Chief Nisleit. How did the SDPOA react to these changes, and did they have to agree before they were implemented?
Great question. Thank you. So myself, my staff has been in contact with the POA leadership under Jack Schaefer, and the POA leadership has been with us from the get-go on this as we were drafting these policies and moving it through. They've been very much in support of this, and so I appreciate their partnership.
Any questions? Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. No, it is. Okay. Sorry. I'm Claudia with Univision San Diego. So can you tell us a little bit in practice, how is this going to look like? Will officers go through kind of like workshops, new training? Will this be, of course, implemented with new officers who join the police force? Just a little bit about logistics.
Yeah, so yes to both questions. So as one of the committee members was speaking about, so there was a new law that comes into effect in July in this year. We're actually ahead of that curve, and that's in de-escalation training that is being taught to senior officers and the academy. What you will see here very quickly is we'll be rolling out additional training, most likely through our success factors, and that's basically just an online platform that we use to push out training. So that will go to all rank and file. We'll also be meeting with all of our field training officers, and we'll also be sitting down with our command staff, so that would be captains, lieutenants, and sergeants, to really, as I did this morning about this policy with my commanding officers, is to really push out the expectations. Again, as has been mentioned, de-escalation has been part of our training. I've been here for 32 years. It's been part of our training. It's been part of our motto, but this is placing a greater emphasis on it with more robust verbiage. And so, as I said earlier, it really goes back to listening to the community, what the community wants to see out of us, what they expect from us, and then making certain that the expectations go to the officers so they understand the operative goals, but also to understand so the community understands what it is that we're doing. What is our mission? What are our goals?
Okay. For the officer accountability, what will happen if there is an officer that might be using excessive force? Will it be kind of like code red, we need to do this? Will there be like some sort of investigation afterwards? Like how will it play out?
So anytime there's an excessive force complaint or it's something, a lot of times it's an investigator reviewing a case before it gets sent to prosecution, sees something that just doesn't look right, that will get forwarded to internal affairs, and an investigation will be launched. Now, if you have a failure to intervene and we see an officer that should have intervened, they would also be a subject officer in that complaint.
Thank you, Chief.
And the next question comes from David Gottfredson with Channel 8. And the question is, 8 can't wait policies are now required by SDPD. In other words, can officers be disciplined for not following any of those 8 policies?
Absolutely. So officers can be disciplined for failing to follow any of our policies or procedures and different protocols that we have in place. So the 8 can't wait, those 8 things from Campaign Zero, clearly, if you violate those, and there's going to be an investigation launched, and if in fact the merits of the case and the truth comes out that you violated one of those policies or procedures, then accordingly discipline would be levied.
And the final question is for Bishop Benson.
Okay.
From Brandon Lewis with CBS 8.
Bishop.
Question is, sir, you mentioned hard work is still needed. What efforts are underway to maintain the dialogue?
Well, I'm honored to mention the group of community leaders that the mayor has put together along with Chief Nisleit to review at some of the recommendations from the Community Review Board as well as other community members. So it's an ongoing work, but the good thing about it is that the people that our mayor and chief has selected are people who are willing to work together to make us have a great San Diego.
I believe that was our last question. Again, I want to thank all the representatives of the community that you've heard from this afternoon. All of the hard work that has gone into getting to not just this point, but along this continuum as we continue to invest in our men and women out there working to serve the public, and very clear expectations on what we expect as a city, what we expect as a department. Again, Chief, thank you for all of your hard work and all the men and women that are here today. This concludes today's press conference. We'll still be available for any questions one-on-one that any may have. Thank you.